The first night, the lights of the alien space station glowed a cold blue against the endless black of space. Inside the medical ward, the air smelled of sterilizing herbs and soft humming machines. Captain Ray Mercer lay on the examination table, his chest rising and falling slowly, his human body covered with faint bruises from the mission earlier that day. He had been pulled from the wreckage of a collapsed tunnel during a joint rescue between humans and the alien Zelari. The aliens had long limbs, glass-like skin, and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They spoke in melodic tones, but not many of them had ever touched a human before. Tonight, one of them would, and she had no idea what she was about to discover. Her name was Lyra, a young Zelari nurse, known for her calm hands and sharp mind. When she walked into the room, Ray noticed her immediately. Her skin shimmered like moonlight through water, and her voice carried a careful gentleness. She glanced at the human's injuries, scanning the strange shapes of his muscles beneath the skin. She had studied human anatomy in school, but never on a real patient. And certainly never so close. "You are warm," she said softly, her accents stretching the words. Ray gave a small smile. "We tend to be, especially when we're alive." She didn't react to the joke. Still focused on the readings from her scanning device, the hum of the medbay machine seemed louder as she began checking his wounds. She pressed her fingers gently against his ribs, feeling the pulse of life through the warmth of his skin. Her kind usually had cooler body temperatures, and touching him felt like touching the sun through fabric. Then, as she moved the scan lower, her eyes caught something unexpected. Just beneath the smooth cloth of his uniform trousers, there was a swelling, a shape she had not seen in any alien patient. Her brow furrowed. Was it an internal injury, a swelling from fluid buildup, or some human organ misplaced? Her training told her to act immediately if swelling appeared near vital structures. But this didn't match any diagram in the med database. She leaned closer, her glowing eyes scanning him with a mix of curiosity and caution. Ray noticed her hesitation and the way she kept glancing toward the same spot. His lips curved in a faint grin. "Something wrong, nurse?" She hesitated before answering. "There is an anomaly," he chuckled lightly. "Not exactly an anomaly." Lyra tilted her head. "Her species' version of a frown. Explain," she demanded softly. Ray paused, enjoying the odd mix of embarrassment and curiosity on her face. But before he could speak, she activated a private shield around the bed, blocking the view from other medics. Her hands moved with professional care as she adjusted his position for a better look. Her scanner beeped, showing strange readings, increased blood flow, heat, and a spike in some hormonal marker she didn't recognize. "This is not injury?" she asked again, her voice lower now. "No," Ray said simply, still holding that half-smile. "It's a natural human reaction." Her eyes widened slightly. "Natural? To what?" Her species had no such outward changes in body shape linked to biology. For them, reproduction was a deliberate clinical process. But here was this human, with a reaction that seemed uncontrolled. Triggered by something, she found herself wondering what had caused it. Had she touched him wrong? Had her presence somehow done this? Her mind swirled with unanswered questions. She glanced at his face, and for a moment, their eyes locked. She quickly looked away, but the warmth she felt in her chest lingered. Ray could see she was still confused. He almost wanted to explain, but a part of him enjoyed watching her try to piece it together. "You'll figure it out," he said teasingly. Her frown deepened, though her glowing cheeks betrayed a faint flush of embarrassment. The door to the ward opened, and another alien nurse peeked in. "Lyra, is the human stable?" "Yes," Lyra replied quickly, lowering her scanner. "Just monitoring one unusual reading." The other nurse gave her a curious look before leaving. Lyra exhaled slowly. Not sure why she had hidden the truth, or what truth there even was. When she turned back to Ray, he was still watching her with those strange human eyes. They didn't glow like hers, yet they seemed to pierce through her. It made her feel exposed. She told herself it was just because she had never treated a human before. But deep inside, she knew something about this man was different. As she prepared the nutrient injection for his healing, her hands brushed against his wrist. The heat of his skin shocked her again. She tried to ignore it, but each time she touched him, her heart, or whatever her people called the organ that held emotion, beat a little faster. The machines hummed, the room was dim, and outside the window, the stars drifted by slowly. For a moment, the space station felt far too small. Ray closed his eyes, relaxing into the bed, and Lyra stood there, still wondering about the swelling and why. For the first time in her medical career, she wasn't sure she wanted all the answers right away. It was the first night of many, and neither of them knew just how much it would change them. Both the private examination and the medical ward was quiet that night. Most of the alien staff had gone to rest in their sleeping pods. Only a few night shift medics moved silently through the corridors, their long shadows flickering under the dim blue lights. Lyra stayed by Ray's bedside, her mind replaying the strange discovery over and over. She had never felt so unsure about a patient before. Her training had taught her how to heal burns from plasma rifles, close deep wounds with SynSkin, and even save a soldier from oxygen collapse, but nothing in her manuals prepared her for this. She activated the privacy field again, the soft shimmer surrounding the bed like a thin veil. Ray raised an eyebrow. "We having another secret meeting?" Her glowing eyes fixed on him. "I need to understand," she said firmly, though there was a faint tremor in her voice. She picked up her handheld scanner and adjusted it to a deeper biological scan. Her slender fingers moved over the device with precision, but her eyes kept flicking to his lower body. "This reaction, does it harm you?" she asked quietly. Ray chuckled. "No, it's not dangerous." Her head tilted in curiosity. "Then why does it happen?" He leaned back against the pillows, watching her try to keep her tone professional. "It's complicated," he replied. "I am a medical professional," she insisted. "Explain so I can understand." Ray sighed, realizing she wasn't going to drop the subject. "It's a normal part of being human," he began. "It happens when we feel certain emotions." Her brow furrowed. "Emotions cause physical change." "Yes," he said, smiling faintly. "Sometimes attraction, sometimes other feelings." She was silent for a long moment, processing his words. Her people didn't display attraction physically, and reproduction was arranged, not driven by emotion. The idea that a body could respond to feelings was both fascinating and strangely personal. She looked down at the scanner readings, the rising temperature and increased heart rate. "This is because of me?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ray met her eyes without hesitation. "Yes." The room seemed to grow warmer in that moment. Lyra looked away quickly, the faint luminescent blush on her cheeks betraying her flustered state. She turned back to the scanner, pretending to focus on the data. Her fingers brushed his hip accidentally, and she felt the heat surge under her touch. Her own heart began to race, a new and confusing sensation. She wondered if this was something dangerous for her instead. The door opened slightly, and another nurse stepped in. "Lyra, the chief medic wants your report. I will deliver it later," she said quickly. Not wanting to be interrupted, the nurse hesitated, glancing at the shimmering privacy field, but left without a word. Once they were alone again, Lyra took a deep breath. "I must admit," she said slowly, "I am uncomfortable not knowing everything." Ray grinned. "Some things you have to experience to understand." Her glowing eyes met his again, and this time she didn't look away immediately. There was a spark of curiosity and something else. "Humans," she began, "you form bonds before reproduction." Yes, Ray said. Strong emotional ones. And this bond makes you protect each other. He nodded. With everything we have, she was quiet, but the thought seemed to stir something inside her. In her culture, there was no such concept. No one protected another because of emotion alone. The soft hum of the machines filled the silence. Ray shifted slightly, wincing at a bruise on his side. Without thinking, Lyra reached out to steady him, her cool hand against his warm skin. She felt the contrast again. His heat seemed alive, almost pulling her closer. She wondered if humans felt this way when they touched one another. Ray's voice broke her thoughts. "You're staring again," he teased. She blinked, her face glowing brighter. "I am." "Studying, sure," he said with a grin. "Studying," she frowned. Unsure why his tone made her chest feel tight in an unfamiliar way. She finished the scan, but didn't end the privacy field. Instead, she asked more questions about human families, relationships, and the strange rituals of courtship. Ray answered patiently, sometimes laughing softly at her reactions. Every time he smiled at her, she felt an odd flutter inside. By the time she finally lowered the privacy field, her hands trembled slightly. As she left to file her report, she realized something troubling for the first time. She wasn't thinking about her patient as the human soldier. She was thinking about him as Ray, and that made her wonder what the next night would bring. Whispers in the ward the following day. The medical ward was busier than usual. A minor accident in the docking bay had brought in several injured workers. The sound of footsteps and the soft hum of machines filled the air. Lyra moved quickly between patients, but her mind kept drifting back to Ray. She hadn't spoken to him since their private conversation the night before. Yet the memory of his steady gaze and the warmth in his voice lingered in her thoughts. She caught herself glancing toward his bed more than once. Every time she did, she noticed he was already watching her. It made her chest feel strange, tight and light at the same time. By midday, the whispers began. 2 nurses in the corner were speaking in low voices, their eyes flicking toward Lyra. One of them smirked. "She's spending too much time with the human," the other laughed softly. "Maybe she likes the way he looks." Lyra's sensitive hearing caught every word, and her cheeks glowed faintly. She pretended not to hear, but their words echoed in her mind. When she finally walked over to Ray's bed for his daily checkup, he greeted her with a smile. "You look distracted," he said. "Just busy," she replied quickly, trying not to show her discomfort. But Ray wasn't fooled. "They're talking about us, aren't they?" Her eyes widened slightly. "How do you know?" "Because people are the same everywhere," he said with a small shrug. "Doesn't matter if they have glowing eyes or not." She tried to ignore his words and began scanning his chest. Her hands were steady, but inside she was unsettled. She had always been seen as professional and focused, never the subject of gossip, but now it seemed every glance and every whisper in the ward was about her and the human soldier. Later that evening, she went to the medical archive to finish her reports. The room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of data screens. But even here, she found herself distracted. She pulled up files on human anatomy and biology, not because she needed them for his treatment, but because she wanted to understand him better. She read about human bonding, about how emotions could lead to lasting partnerships. Some of the images and descriptions made her skin glow faintly again. Footsteps approached, and she quickly closed the files. It was Ray, leaning lightly on the doorframe, his side still wrapped in synth bandages. "You shouldn't be walking without clearance," she said, trying to sound stern. He grinned. "I wanted to see you." Her heart skipped a beat at the words. Though she tried to keep her expression neutral, he stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Don't let them get to you, Lyra." She looked away. "It is difficult. Let them talk," he said gently. "They don't know what's happening between us." Her glowing eyes met his, And what is happening between us? Ray smiled faintly. That's for us to find out. The air between them felt charged. Like the stillness before a storm, Lyra became aware of how close he was. Of the heat radiating from his body, she remembered the scanner readings from the night before and felt her own pulse quicken. She stepped back, breaking the moment. "You should rest," she said softly, but even as she walked away, she knew rest would not come easily for either of them. The next morning, the rumors grew. Louder, a senior medic pulled Lyra aside. "You are here to heal, not to experiment," he said sharply. Her chest tightened. "I am doing my duty." "Then do it without becoming attached," he warned, his tone cold. Lyra said nothing, but inside, a quiet rebellion stirred. That night, she visited Ray after the ward had gone quiet. The lights were low, casting shadows across his face. He was awake, watching the stars drift past the window. When she stepped inside, he smiled as if he had been expecting her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "Too much noise in my mind." She sat beside his bed. The silence between them comfortable this time. They spoke quietly, sharing fragments of their lives. Ray told her about Earth's oceans, about sunsets that turn the sky into fire. She told him about the crystal lakes on her homeworld, glowing under twin moons. With every word, the space between them seemed to shrink. When she finally stood to leave, he caught her hand. His grip was gentle but warm. "You don't have to listen to them," he said, his voice steady. She met his gaze and, for the first time, smiled without hesitation. "I know," she whispered as she left the ward. She realized the whispers no longer bothered her as much, because now she understood something. She wasn't just curious about the human soldier. She was beginning to care, and that was far more dangerous than anything she had been warned about. The night the lights went out, the fourth night since Ray arrived, began like any other. The medical ward was quiet, only the faint hum of machines and the soft rhythm of patients' breathing. Outside, the station drifted along its orbital path, the stars hanging in silence. Lyra was on the late shift, her steps slow but steady as she made her rounds. Ray was half asleep when she came to check on him. His eyes opened when he heard her soft footsteps. "You again," he said, with a small smile. "You sound disappointed," she replied, though her tone carried a hint of playfulness. "Not even close," he said. She was adjusting his vitals monitor when it happened. The lights flickered once, twice, then went completely dark. The hum of the machines faltered, and a low alarm beeped in the background. The emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a dim amber glow. "Power fluctuation," Lyra murmured, scanning the room with her glowing eyes. She moved to secure his life support feed, just in case the outage worsened. Ray sat up slightly, watching her work. "Does this happen often?" "Not in the medical ward," she said, her voice low. "We are supposed to be the safest part of the station." The hall outside was silent, too silent. The sound of other nurses and medics had vanished. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people awake in the entire station. Lyra brought over a small, portable lantern, placing it on the table beside his bed. Its warm glow made her skin shimmer like liquid silver. Ray watched her carefully, noticing how calm she appeared. "Despite the strange situation, you're not worried?" he asked. "Worry wastes energy." She replied simply, "Calm hands heal faster." She sat down beside his bed, the light between them throwing soft shadows across her face. Without the usual blue lighting of the ward, her features seemed warmer, softer. Ray found himself studying the way her eyes reflected the lantern's glow. He didn't realize he was staring until she tilted her head. "What?" she asked, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Just thinking," he said, "about how strange this all is." "Strange?" She repeated. "Yeah," he said. "I crash on an alien station, Get patched up by someone who's never treated a human before, and somehow you're the one I trust the most here." Her expression softened, and she looked down briefly. "Trust is not common in my people's work," she said quietly. "We follow protocols, we keep distance, but with you, 'tis different." The lantern flickered slightly, and the silence grew heavier. She leaned back in her chair, her hands resting loosely in her lap. "Tell me something about humans," she said suddenly. Ray chuckled. "Like what?" "Something important," she replied. "Something you would only tell someone you trust." He thought for a moment, then spoke. "When humans care about someone, really care, we'll do anything for them," he said. "Even risk everything." Lyra listened closely, her eyes locked on his. "That sounds dangerous," she murmured. "It is," he admitted, "but it's also what makes life worth it." The words lingered between them. She didn't fully understand, but she felt the weight of what he said in her culture. Relationships were logical arrangements. No one risked themselves for another without reason. But Ray spoke as if love itself was a reason strong enough. Another shiver ran through the station. The floor beneath them vibrated faintly. Lyra instinctively moved closer to him, her hand brushing his. Her skin was cool against his warmth. And neither of them pulled away. They sat like that for a moment, the lantern casting soft shadows that danced across the walls. "This is comfortable," she said quietly, almost to herself. Ray's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Yeah," she glanced at him, her luminous cheeks glowing brighter for a second before she looked away. Eventually, the power returned. The machines humming back to life, the blue lights of the ward erased the amber glow and returned everything to its usual sterile tone. But for both of them, the warmth of that brief moment remained. Lyra stood, adjusting her uniform. "I should check on the others," she said. Ray nodded. "Sure," though his eyes followed her until she disappeared into the corridor. Later, when she returned to her quarters, Lyra found herself unable to sleep. Her mind replayed the quiet in the ward, the sound of his voice, the feeling of his hand against hers. For the first time in her life, she wondered if she wanted to see patient again, not because of duty, but because of something deeper. And in another part of the station, Ray was lying awake too. Staring at the ceiling, he thought of the alien nurse with the glowing eyes, and how, in the dark, she didn't feel alien at all. The warning morning in the medical ward began with the usual low hum of machines and the steady footsteps of nurses starting their shifts. But for Lyra, the air felt heavier today. She sensed it even before the chief medic summoned her to his office. He stood behind a wide desk, his tall Zelari frame casting a shadow across the room. The pale glow of his eyes was sharp. "Focused, Sid," he said, his tone carrying no warmth. Lyra obeyed, her posture straight, her hands resting neatly in her lap. "I have received reports," the chief began slowly, "that you are spending unnecessary time with your human patient." Her throat tightened. "Captain Mercer requires attentive care. His injuries do not insult my intelligence," he cut in sharply. "The other staff say you stay with him long after required treatment, that you activate privacy fields, that you speak to him in ways that are personal." Lyra kept her gaze steady, but her pulse quickened. "Humans are different," she said. "They require more interaction for trust. It aids recovery. That is not your duty," the chief said coldly. "Your duty is to heal and move on, not attach." His eyes narrowed. "You will reduce your contact with this patient to the minimum necessary." She left the office with her jaw tight and her chest heavy. Her people valued discipline above all else, and personal involvement with a patient was seen as weakness. But as she walked back to the ward, she knew something with Ray had already gone beyond professional. When she approached his bed, he was sitting upright, his expression curious. "You look like you've just been given bad news," he said. She hesitated before answering. The chief has ordered me to limit our time together. Ray's eyes darkened slightly because of what they think is happening. Because of what they fear could happen, she replied. He leaned forward slightly. And what do you think could happen, Lyra? Her breath caught. The truth was, she didn't know exactly, only that every time she stood near him, she felt something she had never felt before. Something her people didn't even have a word for. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She kept her visits short, speaking only about his treatment, but each time she turned to walk away, she could feel his eyes on her. And every step away felt wrong. That evening, when the ward quieted and most of the staff had left, Lyra found herself hesitating in the hallway. Her quarters were in the opposite direction. Her mind told her to go there. But her feet carried her back to Ray's room. He looked up from the datapad he was reading when she slipped inside. You're breaking? Orders, he said softly. I know, she replied, closing the door behind her. Why? She met his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I want to. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken things. She moved closer, checking his vitals with quick, efficient movements. But her hands lingered for a fraction longer than necessary when they touched his skin. You don't have to risk trouble for me, Ray said quietly. Her eyes met his, glowing faintly in the dim light. It is not trouble, she said. It is choice. His lips curved into a faint smile. Then I choose to keep talking to you. They sat like that for a while, speaking in low voices. She told him about the lakes on her homeworld that glowed under the twin moons. He told her about the way Earth sunsets could turn the sky to fire. The conversation wasn't about medicine or recovery anymore. It was about them. When she finally stood to leave, Ray caught her hand gently. Don't let them decide for you, he said. Oh my God. She squeezed his hand once before letting go. I won't. Walking back to her quarters, Lyra knew she had crossed a line. Her people would see it as weakness, even betrayal of duty. But she didn't care. The human's words had taken root in her mind, and she realized she wanted to see where they would lead. No matter the risk, the discharge noticed the announcement came at noon. Carried by a soft chime through the medical ward, a message flashed across the overhead display. And Lyra felt the words hit her like a cold wave. Captain Raymond Mercer cleared for active duty in 48 hours. She read it twice to make sure she had not misread. Then she looked at Ward Ray's bed, where he was already sitting up, a thoughtful look on his face. He caught her eye and gave a small nod, as if to say he had known this was coming. Her chest tightened, but she kept her expression calm as she approached. You saw the notice, he said quietly. Yes. She answered, 48 hours. He searched her face for something she wasn't letting out. You okay? He asked. I am functioning, she replied, which was true, but not the whole truth. The rest of the ward moved around them like a slow river. Nurses changed dressings, medics checked charts. Machines hummed in their steady rhythm, but the space around Ray's bed felt separate, like a bubble caught in still air. Lyra adjusted the monitor, checked his temperature, smoothed the synth skin over his side, all the things she had done every day. Yet today, each movement felt heavier. I'll be transferred to the human cruiser docked at Bay 12. Ray said after a while, my commanding officer is already sending a shuttle. Lyra kept her eyes on the monitor. I see, she said, though she did not really see anything at all. In her mind, she saw a lantern's glow, a warm hand. A quiet promise she had never asked for, but had started to believe. The chief medic called a brief staff meeting at the end of the corridor. Lyra stood with the others, hands clasped behind her back. Face still, Captain Mercer's recovery has been successful, the chief announced. We will prepare his discharge and final checks. His glowing eyes swept the room and paused on Lyra for a fraction of a second. Adhere to protocol, he added, his tone like a seal on a door. After the meeting, Two nurses approached Lyra with careful voices. "You did well," one said. "He will leave healthy. That is our purpose." The other added. Lyra nodded. "Yes," she said, though the words felt like pebbles in her mouth. She returned to Ray's bed for the afternoon check. He was quiet, watching the starfield outside the viewport. "Does it feel strange," she asked softly, "to go back to duty after being still?" For so long, he smiled at the glass. Every time, he said, "But stillness is not where humans stay." She hesitated, then spoke before she could stop herself. "Do you want to leave?" she asked, the question bare and risky. He turned, to her eyes warm and steady. "I want to do my duty," he said, "and I don't want to lose what we found here." Her breath caught at that. "What did we find?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. "A connection," he said simply. "You know it, too." She looked down at her hands, the slight shimmer of her skin betraying her emotions. "My people do not have words for this," she said, "but I feel it." He reached out and rested his hand palm up on the blanket. "Not touching her, just offering for me," he said. "A choice is a kind of word." Even when the mouth stays quiet, the evening shift came and went. The lights dimmed, the ward softened into night. Lyra filed the discharge forms, everything neat and correct. But when she signed the last line, her hand trembled and the signature drifted slightly. She stared at it for a long time, as if looking at a map that no longer led anywhere she knew. She could ask for reassignment. She thought she could request a transfer to the human cruiser as a liaison medic. Such requests were rare and often denied, but not impossible. The thought felt like a door she had never tried to open. Her people would call it impulsive, emotional, unwise. Her heart called it honest. Near midnight, she walked back to Ray's bed. The ward was quiet, the stars drifting like distant embers. He was awake, as if he had been waiting, I thought. "You might come," he said gently. "I had to," she answered, "because tomorrow it will be more difficult." She stood beside him, then sat, then stood again. Unable to choose which position hurt less, he watched her with patient eyes. The way someone watches a storm decide whether to pass or to break. "I want to ask you something," he said at last. She swallowed. "Ask?" "Come with me," he said. The words steady as gravity. The room seemed to tilt, and she caught the edge of the bed to ground herself. "My work," she said slowly. "My people, my place. Still there?" he said. "But you won't lose them by choosing something new." She stared at him, trying to imagine two paths that were not enemies. "My chief will not approve." She murmured, "Maybe not," Ray said, "but he doesn't own your life." Silence spread between them like a calm sea. Her mind listed reasons, rules, consequences. Her heart offered only one answer, pulsing with a quiet, luminous certainty. "Tell me what happens if I say yes," she whispered. "We figure it out," he said. Day by day, she closed her eyes, and in the dark behind her eyelids, she saw the lantern again. She felt the warmth of his hand, the safety of his voice, the rush of the unknown that did not feel like falling, but like stepping forward. When she opened her eyes, she realized she was already holding his offered hand. Her fingers fit there as if they had been waiting. "Then I will try," she said, the words trembling but clear. "I will request liaison assignment to the human cruiser." Ray exhaled, a sound like relief and hope in one breath. "Whatever happens," he said, "I'll be at Bay 12 when your shift ends tomorrow." The next morning came with clipped orders and tidy routines. Lyra submitted her transfer request, the form glowing with her signature. The chief called her in before noon, his voice like cold glass. "This request is irregular," he said. "And unwise? It is my choice," she replied, her voice steady, her eyes unblinking. He studied her for a long, measuring moment, then tapped the approval field with a sharp gesture. "Provisional," he said. 3 cycles for evaluation. She left the office with her hands shaking and her heart blazing. Ray was waiting. By the viewport in the ward, dressed in a simple human uniform. The thin-skin bandage barely visible beneath, he met her halfway. Searching her face for the answer she now carried openly. "Provisional," she said, breathless. 3 cycles. He laughed softly, a sound that warmed the space between them. 3 cycles is plenty to start, he said, at shift's end. Lyra stood at the threshold of the ward and looked back. The blue lights, the soft hum, the ordered rows of beds. The life she had always known. Then she turned toward the long corridor that led to docking bay 12. Ray walked beside her, not pulling, not pushing, just there. Every step felt like the first steps on a new world. Every breath felt like choosing. Behind them, whispers rose and faded like distant wind ahead of them. The shuttle waited with its hatch open like a quiet promise. Lyra tightened her grip on the small pack at her shoulder. Ray's hand brushed hers, not asking, only reminding her that she was not alone. She took the final step onto the ramp, and for the first time in her life, the future did not feel assigned to her. It felt chosen, and it felt alive. The choice made public. The shuttle ride from the Zelari station to the human cruiser was short. But every minute felt stretched. Lyra sat beside Ray, her small pack on her lap. Her hands folded over it like a shield. She watched the stars slide past the viewport, feeling the shift in her world with every passing second. Ray glanced at her, sensing the tension in her posture. "You're not changing your mind, are you?" he asked quietly. She turned to him, her glowing eyes steady. "No. I am deciding what I will say when they ask me why." Docking clamps locked with a soft metallic thud. The hatch opened, and a rush of warm, oxygen-rich air swept in. Human. Voices echoed from the corridor beyond. They carried a different rhythm from Zelari's speech. Warmer, sharper, more alive. Ray stepped out first, then turned to offer his hand. She hesitated only for a heartbeat before taking it. The corridor seemed to brighten as they walked together. Crew members looked up from their work, curious about the alien nurse in the pale uniform walking beside their captain. The first formal test of her choice came sooner than she expected. Ray's commanding officer, Commander Holt, met them at the end of the corridor. His eyes flicked to their joined hands before settling on Lyra. "So you're the Zelari nurse I've heard about," he said. Lyra straightened her posture. "Yes, I have been assigned as liaison medic for 3 cycles." Holt's tone was measured. "Your chief approved this?" "Yes," she said simply. "He believes it is irregular. I believe it is necessary." Holt studied her for a moment, then nodded slightly. "We'll see if you're right." The days that followed were a blend of work and quiet tests. Lyra learned the layout of the cruiser, adapted her medical knowledge to human equipment, and moved among a crew that watched her with open curiosity. Some greeted her with polite smiles, others with cautious distance. She answered their questions with calm precision, never stepping beyond professionalism while on duty. But in the quiet moments, in the mess hall, when they sat together, in the med bay, when she checked his healing scars, the connection between her and Ray grew stronger. There was no need for privacy fields here, though there were still whispers. Ray didn't seem to care, and slowly, Lyra began not to care either. Halfway through her first cycle aboard, a formal message arrived from the Zelari station. It was marked Evaluation Request. Her people wanted a report on her adaptation to human service. The words were clinical. But she knew what they really wanted: proof that she had not lost herself among the humans. Ray found her sitting in the medbay office, staring at the message. "They want you to explain yourself," he guessed. "Yes," she said quietly. "They want to know if I still follow their ways." He leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "So what will you tell them?" She looked up at him. The truth. That evening, she recorded her report. She spoke clearly. Without hesitation, I have served aboard the human cruiser for several standard weeks, she began. I have learned their methods, their strengths, and their values. Have also learned that connection is not a weakness. It is a source of resilience. She paused, aware that these words would not sit easily with the Zalari Council. I will not return unchanged, she continued. Because I have seen what it means to choose and to be chosen, she ended. The recording and sent it before she could second-guess herself. The reply came 2 days later. It was brief, but its meaning was clear. Continue provisional assignment. Evaluation extended to 6 cycles. It was not approval, but it was permission to stay that night. Ray found her on the observation deck. The vast sweep of stars stretched beyond the glass. You told them, didn't you? He said, yes, she replied, and they let me stay. For now, he stepped closer, his voice low. 6 cycles is a long time. She looked at him, the glow of the starlight reflecting in her eyes. Long enough to know if this is more than a reaction. Ray smiled. I already know her. Lips curved slightly. Humans are certain too quickly, and Zalari take too long, he countered. They stood there in the quiet. The galaxy spread wide before them. For the first time since she stepped onto the cruiser, she let herself feel the certainty she had been holding back. She had not just followed him here. She had followed the pull of something she could not name in her own language. Something worth the whispers, the warnings, and the risk. When they left the observation deck, they walked side by side. No longer careful about how close their hands brushed. No longer pretending this was only a professional assignment. Because the choice had already been made, and now it was simply being lived.